The building was a monument to wealth and success, and she was just a small business owner from Brooklyn, struggling to keep her head above water. But here she was, about to walk into the lion's den, where a world she had never known awaited her. She had agreed to the terms of the contract. The fee, the conditions, the NDA. It was all laid out clearly. Half the payment up front. A month-long charade. She would be Alexander Westwood's fake wife, but that was only a temporary role. Once the month was over, everything would return to normal. Or so she hoped. The sleek woman at the front desk gave her a knowing smile as she escorted Maya through the pristine corridors of the Westwood offices. The polished floors reflected the clean, minimalist design of the space. Everything here was designed for one thing: perfection. No detail was too small, no space too insignificant. Everything screamed wealth, power, and control. Maya felt the weight of it all as she walked behind the assistant, her heels clicking against the marble floors. They entered a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. Alexander Westwood was sitting behind a sleek, glass desk, his attention fixed on the multiple computer monitors in front of him. The room was bathed in natural light, and for a moment, Maya almost forgot why she was there. "Miss Rodriguez," Alexander said, finally looking up from his screens, his expression as unreadable as ever. "I assume your presence here means you've accepted my proposal." Maya nodded, though there was a tightness in her chest. She was about to become part of a world she didn't understand, playing a role she had never imagined. And for what? Money. Security. She wasn't sure anymore, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that mirrored her own feelings: desperation. He wasn't just asking her to pretend. He was asking for her help, even if he didn't realize it yet. "I've considered it," Maya replied, setting her bag down and sitting across from him, her posture straight. She wanted him to see that she was in control, even though, deep down, she felt anything but. "But I have conditions." Alexander leaned forward, his sharp gaze never leaving hers. Conditions. His voice held a mixture of curiosity and amusement, as if he hadn't expected anyone to challenge him. But Maya wasn't one to bend so easily. "First," she began, "I need half the payment up front." He didn't flinch. He had expected that. "Second," she continued, "I need a detailed background on you, your family, your business, and especially this Penelope person. I need to know everything." "Reasonable," Alexander said, tapping a note into his tablet. "Third," Maya's voice was firm now, her resolve strengthening. "I won't share a bedroom with you. This is a marriage of convenience, not of intimacy." Alexander raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Maya pressed on. "Fourth, I want a clause stating that if at any point I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, I can terminate the arrangement while keeping the full payment." "You think I'm dangerous?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "No," Maya replied, her tone unwavering. "But I think you're desperate. Desperate people are unpredictable." For the first time, Alexander smiled, not the practiced, charming smile he used with everyone, but a real smile. It transformed his face, making him look less like the stoic businessman, and more like a man who had just been handed a lifeline. "I can work with that," he said. "Welcome aboard, Miss Rodriguez. You've got yourself a month." The act. It didn't take long for Maya to realize that stepping into Alexander Westwood's world was like stepping into a movie, a world meticulously crafted and perfectly staged, but ultimately filled with the kind of pressure that made her feel as though she were constantly walking a tightrope. A wrong move, a misstep, and she could fall into a sea of expectations from which there was no escape. The first day at his penthouse was an adjustment. The sleek, modern apartment, perched high above the bustling streets of Manhattan, felt surreal to Maya. The space was as cold and pristine as the man who owned it. Everything in the penthouse screamed wealth. From the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, to the minimalist furniture that seemed chosen as much for its beauty as for its ability to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. Maya had always been content with the small, cozy apartment she'd kept in Brooklyn. The chaos of the city had always felt familiar to her. The endless noise, the crowded streets, the way it felt like everyone was fighting to survive, just as she was. Here, though, in this gleaming tower of glass and steel, she felt out of place. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the towering figure of Alexander Westwood himself, or the cold, unrelenting world he inhabited. She had only just begun to settle in when Alexander breezed through the door that evening after work, looking every bit the part of the businessman he was. His dark suit was sharp, his eyes focused, as if he were constantly scanning the room for something that wasn't there. But when his gaze fell on Maya, something seemed to shift, a brief flicker of vulnerability behind the perfect facade. She didn't know him well enough to pinpoint what it was, but she could see that the man before her was not the same person he'd been when they first met. There was a weight to him now, a quiet exhaustion that didn't belong in someone so young. "You've settled in well," Alexander remarked as he walked toward the living room, his voice smooth but distant. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the sound of the liquid filling the silence. His movements were deliberate, controlled, practiced, even. Maya, still adjusting to the rhythm of this strange new life, nodded but didn't say anything. She was still processing her own emotions, confusion, unease, and a strange mixture of excitement and dread. He sat down across from her, his eyes narrowing slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like she was being weighed and measured. "I'm sure you're wondering what exactly you've signed up for," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of amusement. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it obvious?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. "I'm your fake wife for the month. I show up at your social events, make your family believe we're madly in love, and then you walk away when it's all over. Simple, right?" Alexander gave her a small, knowing smile. "If only it were that easy," he said quietly. "But it's more than just appearances. This is a game with real stakes. My father isn't just forcing me into a marriage for the sake of power. He's forcing me to give up everything I've worked for, the tech division I've built, the independence I'd fought for. He wants me to be his heir, not my own person. It's a legacy I never chose." Maya was silent, watching him, her fingers drumming nervously against her thigh. She hadn't expected this, a glimpse into the world of Alexander Westwood that wasn't just about money, power, or status. There was pain there, hidden behind his arrogance, his polished exterior. She had known that his life hadn't been his own, but hearing it from him directly hit her harder than she anticipated. "I get it," Maya said after a long pause. "You're trapped in a life you didn't ask for, and you need a way out." He nodded, his eyes locking onto hers. "And that's where you come in. I need you to play the role of the perfect wife. No slip-ups, no mistakes. You need to convince my father that I found someone who shares his vision for our future, a woman who can handle the pressure, who won't back down when things get difficult." He leaned forward, his voice suddenly urgent. "And I need you to make him believe that we're in love, truly, madly, deeply in love." Maya looked at him, her stomach turning. She wasn't some naive actress. She had seen the way the rich and powerful moved through the world, always playing a part, always keeping their true selves hidden. But now, here she was, being asked to do the same. Pretend, smile, hold hands, look at him with affection in front of his father and their friends. It was a performance, nothing more. But even as she nodded, agreeing to the terms, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was becoming more than just a pawn in this game. The more she learned about Alexander, the more she realized that this wasn't just about avoiding a marriage. It was about reclaiming control over a life that had been stolen from him. The next few days were a whirlwind of events, meetings, and social functions that pushed Maya into a world she had never known. Alexander was meticulous in his preparations, briefing her on everything she needed to know about his family, his friends, and the corporate dinners they would attend together. She learned that Alexander's life wasn't just about the Westwood Empire. It was about maintaining an image, a perfect facade that everyone else in his world adhered to. He introduced her to his friends, all of whom were as polished and perfect as he was, none of them ever showing an inkling of vulnerability. Maya quickly realized that the stakes of their little charade were higher than she had initially thought. It wasn't just a matter of faking a relationship for the sake of a family legacy. It was about keeping the entire world from seeing what lay beneath. The carefully crafted masks they all wore would crumble the moment anyone looked too closely. At one event, a high-profile charity gala hosted by one of Alexander's business associates, the couple was the center of attention. Cameras flashed as Alexander took Maya's hand, leading her into the ballroom. The room buzzed with excitement as the guests, all wealthy and influential, turned their eyes to the pair. They played their parts well, laughing at the right moments, exchanging meaningful glances, and showing affection when needed. Maya had been trained for this. She had always been good at keeping things light, at keeping herself distanced from the world she had to navigate. But this felt different. When Alexander looked at her, she caught a glimpse of something deeper in his eyes, a flicker of real emotion, of exhaustion. He wasn't just playing the role of the wealthy businessman trying to avoid an arranged marriage. He was playing the role of someone who was losing himself, piece by piece, to a world that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. Maya realized then that this wasn't just a job anymore. There was more at stake here than money or personal gain. She was part of a story that had already been written for them, but something about it made her wonder if they could still change the ending. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't the characters they appeared to be. The true choice. The final gala arrived faster than either of them had expected. The extravagant ballroom, dressed in sparkling crystal chandeliers and opulent decorations, felt almost suffocating in its beauty. Maya, standing at the edge of the dance floor, surveyed the room. There were people here she had only heard of, the movers and shakers of New York, the kind of people who controlled everything with a quiet nod or a well-timed handshake. For the past month, she had been a part of this world, playing the role of Alexander Westwood's loving wife, an actress in a play whose script had been written long before she stepped into the scene. But the truth, she realized, was that the script had changed. For both of them. The evening was a blur of flashing cameras and polite conversations, of people asking how she was adjusting to her new life, and offering congratulations for the happy couple. All the while, Alexander moved through the crowd with an air of perfect composure, the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him, even though he wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As the night wore on, Maya found herself noticing how many times his gaze would drift to her, lingering for just a second longer than usual, as if there was something unspoken between them, something neither of them had yet dared to voice. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt the ground beneath her feet shift. Her role in this elaborate masquerade was nearing its end, but there was something in the way Alexander looked at her, the way their interactions had evolved, that made her question whether she wanted to walk away from this world when the contract expired. Was it just the money, the security that had driven her? Or had something deeper, something more human, started to take root between them? The orchestra played a soft, melancholic waltz as Alexander crossed the room, his expression unreadable. He came to a stop in front of her, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. "Maya," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that didn't belong at such a public event. "I need to talk to you." She smiled, trying to hide the confusion that had suddenly stirred inside her. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice steady, masking the sudden anxiety in her chest. The lights above them cast a warm glow, making everything seem surreal. "Let's step outside," he suggested, his hand gently brushing against hers as he guided her toward the terrace. There was no one else outside, only the cool night air, and the city lights below. As they stood there, overlooking the lights of Manhattan, Alexander finally spoke, his words catching in his throat. Maya. He paused, as if trying to find the right words. I never intended for any of this to happen. I thought I could get through this month, keep my father happy, and walk away. But somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. I forgot what I wanted. And I spent so much of my life living for other people's expectations that I lost sight of the one thing that matters. His voice trembled for a moment before he steadied himself. You. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. He wasn't speaking in the way she had expected, the way a man might speak to a woman he was trying to impress. There was no arrogance, no calculating words meant to get what he wanted. There was vulnerability, raw and honest, and it made her heart ache. I never asked for this life, Maya. Alexander continued, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't want to be trapped by my family's plans any longer. But I also don't want to walk away from this, from you. Not without knowing if this, what we've built, even if it's been a lie, is something real. Maya swallowed hard, her own emotions surging. This wasn't part of the plan. They weren't supposed to feel this way. She wasn't supposed to feel anything at all. But the lines between the act and reality had blurred so much that she couldn't tell where the performance ended and her real feelings began. You don't need to do this for your father, she said quietly. You've already built something on your own, something meaningful. You're not just a pawn in their game anymore, Alexander, and neither am I. He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as if he were fighting with a part of himself he couldn't quite let go of. I can't keep living for everyone else. I want to choose my own future. I want to make my own decisions. And I want you in it. Maya felt a wave of emotion crash over her, a mix of relief and fear. She had never expected this moment to come. She had never imagined that she would find herself in a position where someone like Alexander Westwood, would look at her like she was the key to his freedom. She had only come into his life to help him escape the prison of his family's expectations, but now she realized that both of them had found something more, an unexpected connection, a shared understanding that neither of them had been able to articulate. I'm not just a solution to your problem, Alexander, Maya said, her voice breaking. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here because I've seen the real you, the person behind all the suits and the power. And that's the person I want to stand beside, whether it's in a role we're playing or in a life we're building together. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly as they intertwined with hers. Then let's stop pretending, he whispered, his voice full of a quiet urgency. Let's build something real. The night air felt different then, lighter, as if the weight of the entire month had been lifted from their shoulders. The music inside the ballroom continued to play, but the world outside felt quieter now, as if everything had paused in this one perfect moment. The two of them stood together, not as a businessman and a hired companion, but as two people who had stumbled into each other's lives and found, amidst all the chaos, something worth fighting for. Maya smiled softly, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with the lies they had told or the charade they had acted out. She knew, deep down, that this was the real decision, both of them choosing, finally, to live for themselves, to make their own future, and to write a story that didn't belong to anyone but them. And as the night sky stretched above them, they stepped back into the world, not as strangers, but as partners, ready to face whatever came next, not with fear, but with the promise of something real. For the first time, Alexander Westwood was truly free, and Maya, for once, could let go of the past and embrace the future she had always wanted, one that wasn't just about survival, but about living, truly living, for herself. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.